Sacramento Kings general manager Monte McNair has a lot of routes he can take and one major decision to make with his 4th overall pick in the 2022 NBA draft. Trade the pick, draft a player. We talked a lot about Keegan Murray and Jaden Ivey over the last couple of episodes. Now we're getting back on the trade the pick train. I'm going to be joined by Rylan Styles, the host of the Locked on Thunder podcast. Could the Kings and the Thunder be draft night trade partners? Does Sacramento have a chance using the 4th pick and other assets to land Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Let's talk about it on today's episode of the Locked on Kings podcast.
You are Locked on Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked on Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked on Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January all the way through to December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm looking forward to my 9th season covering the Sacramento Kings professionally. This is year 5 for me hosting the Locked on Kings podcast. I currently work for ABC 10 News in Sacramento. If you've been listening to my conversations over the last week on Locked on Kings, you know I've spent some time talking about the Kings trading this pick, spent some time talking about different likely prospects available at 4 that the Kings could be interested in, shared my opinions. My most recent episodes did an in-depth dive with a beat writer covering Purdue basketball and Jaden Ivey. Very next episode did an in-depth dive on a beat writer covering Iowa basketball on Keegan Murray. So go and check those out. I will be doing more of those. I have a Duke insider and Duke beat writer coming up, going to talk to us about both AJ Griffin and Paulo Banchero. And I have more beat writers, more national draft analysts. Those are all coming up in the weeks to come, building up to the NBA draft. So I hope you'll continue to tune in and join me for that. But as for today, we're getting back into the mindset of what if the Sacramento Kings traded the 4th overall pick? Realistically, what can they get? And I'll preface every single time I bring up Kings trading the pick, I have to preface it with saying you do not trade the 4th overall pick unless you're getting minimum a starter caliber player. You don't trade it for even 2 really good role players. You don't make that decision. You have a chance with the 4th overall pick to draft a superstar. So I don't know if the Kings are less inclined to trade the pick than maybe they would have been had they stayed at 7. In fact, I was told and had a lot of conversations with people saying that the Kings were going to heavily shop the pick if it stayed at 7. Now that it's up at 4, I believe the Kings are still going to put out feelers. I believe they're still going to take calls at least, or maybe even make calls about trading this pick away and seeing what they can get. But the list of players and the list of talent that they're willing to take back for their draft pick has now gotten a lot slimmer. But there might be some talent on the Oklahoma City Thunder that the Sacramento Kings are willing to trade their 4th overall pick for. Of course, the Thunder have the 2nd overall pick. Maybe the Kings and Thunder could find out a way to swap picks. What would the Kings have to give up to move up in the draft? I'm going to be discussing all of this, and I'm going to be throwing out a bit of a pipe dream in my conversation with Rylan Styles, host of the Locked on Thunder podcast today. Let me know if you think the Kings and Thunder would be good trade partners. Let me know if there's any players on the Thunder specifically you'd love the Kings to target and you'd be willing to give up number 4 for. Or maybe other players in general outside of OKC that you think, hey, this is the type of player that I think has equal value or is good enough for me to comfortably be willing to say goodbye to the 4th overall pick in this draft for. Let me know who those players are. Think about that a little bit as you're listening to my conversation with the host of the Locked on Thunder podcast and my friend here on the Locked on Podcast Network, Rylan Styles. Only 3 teams finished with a draft pick higher than the Sacramento Kings in this draft. One of those teams being the Oklahoma City Thunder, who ended up at number 2. I'd say the Kings would rather be in that position, but based on the last time they had the number 2 pick, didn't go so well. Maybe we're happy to stick at 4. But I have Rylan Styles, host of the Locked on Thunder podcast, joining me today. And Rylan, the main thing that we're going to talk about is the possibility of a trade going down with the Kings and the Thunder using the number 4 pick to potentially give the Thunder 2 top 4 picks, which would be pretty interesting. We know the Thunder have plenty of first-round draft picks, so they could definitely use another one, of course. But before we dive into the hypothetical trade that I want to propose, that I have a pretty good feeling where it's going to go, I wanted to ask, in your mind, in Oklahoma City's mind, like what is the pick at number 2? And is it the person you want at that spot? Or do you think the person that you want is going to be taken by Orlando one spot ahead of you?
Yeah, I think that the pick at number 2 is going to be Chet Holmgren. I think if you ask Sam Presti, that's who he desperately wants. I mean, you saw him kind of lay the foundation for how an awkward 7-foot playmaker would work in an NBA offense with Poku. Now you take that and get a much better player and much better talent in Chet and kind of implement that on your NBA roster next year. As far as that's who Sam Presti would want. My number 1 on my big board is Jabari Smith Jr. So I have Chet at number 2. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really flip back and forth for me that much. But I think that Chet would be a very interesting high swing candidate for the Thunder, who are known to be swinging high in these NBA drafts.
Assuming the top 3 is going to be what we expected to be, Chet, Jabari, and Paulo, number 4 is an interesting spot. You could say it's a power position for the Kings in the sense that they could pick a player and screw everything up. They could go where everybody's expecting with like a Jaden Ivey pick, or if somehow one of those 3 slides out, the Kings get first dibs and can grab them. So it's a position that could have some interest in terms of trade value around the league. But Rylan, outside of, let's play out your perfect scenario. Let's say Jabari goes number 1 and Chet goes 2, or Chet goes 1 and Jabari goes 2. You get one of those 2 players, right? Let's say Paulo goes 3. Jaden Ivey's there at 4. Keegan Murray's there at 4. Shaden Sharp's there at 4. AJ Griffin's there. Like, is in your mind, is there a interest from an Oklahoma City standpoint of, man, if the Thunder did have that 4th pick, there's another really, really good talent there that could be a massive win for the Thunder?
I think that Shaden Sharp is a guy that if Sam Presti fell in love with these next couple of weeks leading to the draft, I would not be surprised. He has all of the talent, all of the upside. He has that kind of superstar ability about him. And we've seen Sam Presti not be afraid about not drafting a college guy. College is not what Sam Presti's all about. He hasn't taken a college guy with his first pick in a draft since Domantas Sabonis, who's now on the Kings. So I think that it's not going to worry him. He took Darius Baisley, who was a New Balance intern at 21 in the first round. Now, it's a lot different to do that at pick 4 than pick 21, but it just shows that he is comfortable with not seeing you play in college. Terrence Ferguson didn't play in college. That was a guy who was supposed to help a Thunder team that was supposed to contend right away. And instead of going the traditional route, he went with Terrence Ferguson from up the road in Tulsa, who didn't play in college. Again, the Baisley thing, Paolo Banchero, no. Pokusevski was playing in the 2nd division in Greece. I went through every name in the book, but Pokusevski was playing in the 2nd division in Greece, and then they took him with 16th and traded up to do so. So I think that it would not shock me at all to see them fall in love with Shaden Sharp in the pre-draft process. If Shaden Sharp has a great private workout, has a great personality and interview about him in the interview session, and of course, medical's clear, that's for every player. So it would not shock me at all if Shaden Sharp is their number 4 guy in their big board.
So Rylan, I have been a fan of the idea of the Kings trading their draft pick this year for a long time. Now, of course, I expected that pick to be more around the 7 range, not necessarily in the top 4 range. The good news is when you move up, your draft pick has higher value. The bad news is when you move up, it's harder to trade because you expect to get higher value. And I was putting together a list of players that not necessarily that I would take, but that I would humor conversations with guys like John Collins, Julius Randle, things like that. And I was also thinking, okay, the Kings also have somewhat of a pretty big 2-guard hole right now, trying to establish a starting 5. And I was going through two guards that realistically, or maybe unrealistically, that I could see the Kings at least making an effort towards using their number 4 pick. And a guy that I absolutely would take, no questions asked, would be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from Oklahoma City. I understand he just signed a new contract. I understand he has a lot of fans there. He's young, tremendous upside. There's a reason why I love SGA so much. It's because Oklahoma City and basically everybody else that watches SGA loves him so much. Is there even a conversation to be had here? We're going to do it anyway, but is there even a conversation to be had here, or is SGA about as untouchable as they come?
If I had to be the GM of the Thunder, I'd say it's as untouchable as they come. I think that with Sam Presti, though, the conversations are always going to be had. I mean, he would have conversations about anybody on any roster ever. I think that the one thing is, in the NBA, you're going to find drama, and drama is going to find you. And so far, there's been no drama surrounding Shai and the Thunder. However, the Thunder worked behind the scenes with Paul George and Russell Westbrook. Whenever up front, we thought they were going to run it back and try it one more time, even though that, of course, did not happen. So it could be working behind the scenes. However, I'd say that if I had to predict, he's going to stay in Oklahoma City this year, his first year kicking into that max contract, and then move on from there. Moving forward, I will say that the Thunder now have locked themselves into having 5 more years with Shai. Most players do not re-sign after that second contract with the Thunder. Even high-end guys, no matter how an organization treats them, they don't re-sign most of the time. So you've got 5 years. Do you think you can win a championship with Shai in 5 years? And that's kind of where Sam Presti has to decide what route this rebuild is going to take. So I think that with Shai, ultimately, he's not going to get traded. I would be surprised if he was traded this offseason. And I'm not really sure what even you would look for in a trade with SGA, because I think if you trade SGA, you're just simply tearing everything down. To the point of Sacramento and the point guard, shooting guard thing, I think that it could get messy in Sacramento if they were to trade for Shai, because Shai has been very outspoken about wanting to be a point guard. And that's been surprising to me in the sense of we saw him thrive off ball with Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder in closing lineups of a 3-guard lineup that before the pandemic was trending towards home court advantage in the postseason. If we had a regular, real season on March 11th, the day that we all are famous for, that was a game to decide who got home court for that time and place in the Western Conference in the 4th seed between them and Utah. So I think that, seeing it laid out that way of even after you saw how successful you could be off ball with a 3-guard lineup, now being so adamant about playing point guard, I think could lead to a messy road with the Kings. And also, it's not a bash the Kings segment. They've got to find out how to play with Josh Giddey, who's a non-ball player too, and SGA. So I think that, he did the GQ article where he says he wants to be the best point guard of all time. You can't be the best point guard if you're not playing point guard. He said in every press conference he wants to be the point guard and kind of initiate offense and lead the way in that sense. So that's a tangent here where if you're the Kings, if you can find a player who more fits with a guy like Fox, maybe that's the kind of route you want to go versus a guy who's been very clear about being a point guard.
Interesting. Out of curiosity, if both SGA and De'Aaron Fox were on Sacramento, or let's say both of them were in Oklahoma City, you had to choose between one of the two of them, assuming that both are unhappy or one is unhappy with their current role. I imagine if it was in Sacramento, Fox would still be the primary ball handler and Shai would be expected to kind of fall in line there. In Oklahoma City, it might be the other way around. For you personally, between the two of them, who would you choose?
For me, it would be Shai because I think that he's just a better player. And I also think that he's a versatile player. I think that this notion that he wants to be the point guard and wants to be the point guard and wants to be the point guard from himself can be talked down. It can be leveled with whenever you show him, look, whenever Josh Giddey has the ball, he's not going to go score every possession. He has the ball to make your life easier. He has the ball to open you up. And for the Kings, it could be the same for De'Aaron Fox, who had the ball to open up Shai off ball. And then showing him, look, you succeeded in this role with the Clippers, with the Thunder. And you're still going to get your opportunities to be the point guard. You'll still have half the possessions where you're an isolation scorer because that's what he does so well. Shai's never going to be in a spot where he's playing totally off ball because his most important trait, his most elite trait in the NBA is his isolation scoring. And it's him getting to the rim and finishing there, and also the drive and kick to set up his teammates. So if you eliminate Shai's on-ball ability and just relegate him to being a totally off-ball player, you've then chopped your nose to spite your face. So Shai, in any circumstances with any player, is going to get touches on ball. It's just a matter of, is he going to be your quote-unquote point guard and how that all operates. I think, honestly, it'd be a tougher sell in Sacramento and in Oklahoma City right now to relegate him to off-ball, because even if you put him in Sacramento, I think that the Kings are, a 5, 6, 7 seed at best, play-in tournament type of team, and you got moved to a new team. You feel like you're better than Fox, and you're still not winning at the highest level. I think that would kind of take over for him in terms of handling the ball and being the point guard. In Oklahoma City, you're not even going to be close to winning in Oklahoma City. You're going to want the ball in your hands. You're going to want to be the guy making the plays and getting the buckets. So for me, I just envision Shai as a point guard because that's what he envisions himself at. But I will say, I don't think that he's somebody who would be so stubborn as to not play shooting guard at all. I think there's going to be times in games where he has to. So it's just kind of a chicken or the egg argument, so to say, of what comes first. Is unhappiness with the surroundings, or is unhappiness with the position? Or can you meditate all of that and just kind of make it all come up and rise to the middle at some degree?
Today's episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They have these incredible Built Puffs, which are protein-infused marshmallows. Thankfully, around my birthday time, they released the cake puffs, which are amazing birthday cake puffs. Now they have a new brownie batter puff. Again, protein-infused marshmallows. They're treats that basically are candy, but they are good for you. 17 grams of protein, 140 calories, 7 grams of sugar. That's it in these brownie batter puffs. They're so delicious. Add those to the amazing Built Bars that the Built Bar puts out, and with their different flavors covered in 100% chocolate. Man, everything Built puts out, it is absolutely delicious, and it is good for you. No matter what you order, make sure you use our special promo code for Locked On listeners. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order of puffs or bars at built.com. Is OKC trending towards a choose one or the other, Josh Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Are we trending in that direction? And if so, do you have a kind of inkling or an idea of what OKC would choose in that scenario?
Well, I don't think it's trending towards that way yet, because Josh Giddey has been, ever since he's gotten Oklahoma City, even before he even arrived in Oklahoma City, he has been just fawning over SGA. On draft night, whenever he went backstage and talked to those of us in the media on draft night, the first thing he said was, I'm so excited to play with Shai because I've never gotten the opportunity to play with another lead guard before in Australia. I've never been on a team that had another guard. I was always the only one to handle the ball, initiate the offense, and it puts a lot of pressure on you to do that. So before he even landed in Oklahoma City, he was hyping up Shai. This entire season, even throughout their ups and their downs, he's been hyping up Shai. And then in his end of season press conference, he said everything he said about Shai. He said, first of all, whenever I have the ball, I understand that my role in my offense, my role in this offense is to get Shai the ball. That's my role. It's not to go score. It's not to go do anything else. I only have the ball in my hands to get it back to Shai, because that's the guy we want with the ball in his hands. To me, if you have a teammate like that, you're not going to have a problem with him if he understands his role is to get you the ball right back. And I don't know if Fox would be willing to take down that kind of role to keep relationships kind of smooth in Sacramento. Number two, Josh Giddey did let us in on a little secret that, he had his hip injury the game after the All-Star break against Phoenix. However, that game against Phoenix, right whenever Josh Giddey got hurt and they never played together again, was their very best game. And he said, you know why that was our very best game? We had a conversation together. Me, Shai, head coach Mark Dagnall, and then the Thunder as an organization had a conversation. And he thinks that conversation put them on a better plane to be successful together. Granted, we never got to see it again. We got to see it for one game after that conversation. But it seems as though Josh Giddey is doing everything in his power to make this duo work. And it's hard to turn your back on a teammate that's doing that for you.
All right, Rylan, let's say that Kings general manager Monty McNair got Sam Presti to pick up the phone and actually humor this SGA conversation. I know 4 is not enough, plus financially it doesn't work. Where does this conversation have to start to even get Oklahoma City to consider parting from SGA?
It's so hard because
do the Kings even have it? Like, the Kings might not even have the package necessary.
I'm not sure that anyone has the package necessary. This is not a kind of a traditional bash the Kings segment. I don't think that there's a place out there right now that could get Shai, because it's not like last year where you had the 6th pick and you thought the world was ending before you lucked into Josh Giddey. This year you have the number 2 overall pick, so it's not like you can move up in this year's draft. Next year, let's say that you give the Kings unprotected pick next year. Well, if I'm giving you Shai, the Kings aren't going to be in the running for Victor, who's the prize of next year's draft. So that's not even giving me another shot at Victor. And that's the same thing for if I give Shai to Orlando, or give Shai to Houston, or give Shai to anywhere for an unprotected pick. Whoever I give Shai to is going to trade all of that and take on that max contract to not shut him down halfway through the year. They're going to play him. They're going to ride it out, and they're going to be a play-in team, because Shai almost dragged the team with Al Horford to the play-in before they started shutting everybody down. That's how much of a winner that Shai is. So I don't know how in the world there's a package right now, given the Thunder's lottery luck, that can take Shai off the team this year, because it just doesn't make sense. I think that with Shai, he is such a winner that whoever you give it to is going to immediately decrease the value of your unprotected first-round pick. And the Thunder have 17 future first-round picks. I mean, they can always use more. I don't buy into the notion that you just have way too many. You just can't. You should stop getting money. If that was the case, we wouldn't have billionaires and trillionaires. But the value of them goes down depreciably whenever you have the number 2 overall pick and you get the second guy in a draft. And the team ahead of you is Orlando. Are they really going to take the best guy in the draft? Probably not. They're probably going to take the guy that Sam Presti wants. So I just don't see a pathway to move off of Shai this year, or why it would make any sense for the Thunder to do so for any team, not just the Kings. It's just what would be your best offer? What's that line you can't cross? If I put you in the GM chair for the Kings right now today, tell me what line you would not cross. What would you get up to and offer Sam Presti for the final before I hung up the phone?
I wouldn't cross the line of both Fox and Sabonis. I think one or the other in the conversation is realistic. Maybe not with 4, but I don't. That's tough. And I kind of understood or believed that this was going to be part of the conversation too. And you bring up an excellent point about how OKC's draft position really secured their future with Shai in a lot of ways. It sounds like if Kings fans were rooting for the idea of an SGA trade to Sacramento, essentially they were rooting for the Oklahoma City to get worst case scenario in the draft lottery, and they got second best. So maybe as soon as that card came out that the Thunder got the second overall pick, any chance of an SGA trade to Sacramento, and it sounds like anywhere in the NBA, at least for the short term, was killed.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, you think about it too. I mean, just Fox and Sabonis. If you're the Thunder, you have Shai graded higher. I know that Kings fans might have those two guys graded higher than Shai, but if you're the Thunder, you have Shai graded higher than Sabonis and Fox. So you'd be swapping out Shai for a worse player in your eyes and not getting the 4th overall pick, to where all you do is make the team worse. But it's not like you traded Shai for a bum. So those two guys are not going to get you closer to being the worst team in the league, which if you trade Shai, you'd want to be. If you trade Shai, you've waved the white flag of we want to be the very, very, very worst team in the league next year and pray that we get the 1st overall pick and draft Victor. And that is our new core, because Victor's timeline would fit with Chet and you'd move forward with that, plus your 17 future 1st-round picks. But here's the thing, though. If you're the Thunder and you have those 1st-round picks and you can just go out and go get a new disgruntled star, why wouldn't you keep your own star and just add that star to Shai in a couple of years, right? So if you're the Thunder, you could have Shai, then you could have Chet, then you could have Giddey. Next year, you in a loaded draft class, even if you don't get number 1, you're still going to get a very good player next year in the draft, and then go trade for Karl-Anthony Towns, or then go trade for Donovan Mitchell, or then go trade for Rudy Gobert, and then go trade for whoever's out there at the time, Bradley Beal, whoever's out there for the Thunder, and now all of a sudden, you've got a really strong nucleus in Oklahoma City and draft picks left over. Whereas if you trade Shai, you're always going to be searching for Shai, because as much as we all love Josh Giddey, he's not Shai. As much as we all love the idea of Chet Holmgren, he won't be Shai. The same thing with Jabari Smith, the same thing with Paolo Banchero. None of those guys project to be as good as Shai is. So you're going to be searching and searching and searching for Shai this entire time. Whereas now you've already got at least one of those guys, because I think that Shai at worst is a number 2 option for a team that can go win a championship. And those guys do not just come out of nowhere. No matter how often you tank, no matter how good your GM is, no matter what trades you make, it's very hard to get those guys on your roster.
Well, I knew before I hit record that this was a pipe dream, but you done gone and crushed it, Rylan. Thank you very much. Let's end with an even more depressing question. Who is closer to actually, I won't say just making the playoffs, because that doesn't necessarily mean anything. As much as the Kings would love to make the playoffs for the first time in 16 freaking seasons, it doesn't matter if you don't build upon that. Do you think Oklahoma City is closer to building a dynasty than the Sacramento Kings are at this point?
I'm going to end with another question for you too, but for this question, I struggled to say the Kings are in a better spot for a dynasty, because you just look what the Thunder have done. The Thunder have Shai and Giddey. How would you, as a Kings fan, grade out Shai and Giddey? I think that Shai, again, is a number 1, number 2, whatever, and maybe Fox negates that. Does Sabonis negate what Shai could become? I mean, but does Sabonis negate what Giddey could become with, as long as Giddey's under contract? Giddey's locked in to your organization for 8 more seasons. Not the case, I don't think, for Sabonis, obviously. So you have 2 foundational pieces right there. Then you go draft Chet. If you believe in Chet, then you think that Chet is already a 3-headed monster, where the Thunder check all the boxes, 1, 2, and 3. The Thunder have the 3 better players to start. Then you move on to the Thunder can go trade for any disgruntled star they want to. So if they wanted to this offseason, they could go overwhelm whoever comes available. Donovan Mitchell with the Utah Jazz, just give them 7 first-round picks, get Donovan Mitchell to Oklahoma City, and just go in for whatever that team could make. Or they could sit and wait and get the new CBA in their hand next year with the new 2023 CBA. That way they don't get screwed over by any of the language in there, as they did with the Kevin Durant year, whenever they lost Kevin Durant, and then move forward from there in 2023 with a clean cap sheet. I think that the Kings also, though, can create enough salary cap. I don't think that's a problem for the Kings. But for the Thunder, the $27.5 million you owe to Kemba Walker comes off the books this year. Derek Favors' $10 million comes off the books this year. You're not paying Kyle Singler anymore next year, to where next year you're literally only owed one max contract in Shai, and then the rest of your guys, as of right now today, are on first-year contracts, are on rookie scale contracts. You have everything at your disposal next year in terms of salary cap. You have 17 future first-round picks. You have the best GM or one of the best GMs in the sport. I don't see how many teams are ahead of the Thunder in terms of building the next dynasty in the NBA.
It's funny thinking about the Oklahoma City roster. As much as I'd love to have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the Sacramento Kings, I would be nervous from a Kings perspective. If both teams swapped rosters, I would be nervous because you're putting a lot in your hands of your player development system, which the Kings have notoriously struggled with. So if Oklahoma City can find a way to get all these players to pan out and develop to reach the potential of being top picks year after year after year, I think I agree with you. However, Sacramento has changed their route to, in trading Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis, they changed the route of, we're going to go and get proven NBA talent now that we don't have to develop. We just know what they're going to bring right now. And hopefully that'll wake De'Aaron Fox the hell up to be worth the money that they paid him and to reach the all-star status that they believe he still can be. And then with a sprinkle of a 4th overall pick right here, or by trading the 4th overall pick to get another player who's already NBA ready to plug in. The Kings are definitely more short-term, while OKC is more long-term, but I don't know, Kings fans, you can let me know in the comment section down below. I wouldn't be too surprised, even if it meant the playoff drought extending for another 2-3 seasons. I wouldn't be too surprised if there were some Kings fans that wanted to swap rosters. There also might be some Kings fans that are throwing tomatoes at their screen right now thinking that's absurd. The Kings are in a much better place. So regardless, Kings, Thunder, they're going to be fun to watch in their own ways. Rylan, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for crushing my dreams of SGA as usual. And I look forward to chatting with you again in the near future about whatever other hypothetical dumb trade we can come up with.
I have one more dumb trade. Since you've needled my fan base a little bit here at the Thunder, would you take 12 Dort for 4?
No. No. I like Dort. I like Dort a lot. Dort would do a lot of things. Dort actually, was it Tyrese or was it De'Aaron that Dort made look foolish this year? I think it was De'Aaron. Yeah, I think Dort made De'Aaron look absolutely foolish this year. I like Dort a lot defensively. Dort does a lot of what the Kings need defensively. I think the Kings are also hopeful that Davion Mitchell can become their Dort in their own ways. So no, the only way I'm trading number 4, for me personally, the only way I'm trading number 4 is if I'm getting an established NBA starter. I think Dort could be that, maybe not in Sacramento for the Kings to make the jump they're looking to make. So I personally would say no. Also, I'm not too familiar with who's really available in that 12 range that the Kings would really be interested in. But the fact that OKC's got 2 first-round picks already in this draft, I'm going to be keeping an eye on them regardless because, man, y'all, like you said, with all those draft picks that Presti got, the Oklahoma City Thunder are just a ticking time bomb in my mind too. If they want to, they can say, all right, we're taking over the league, or we're shutting this down. All of your trades or your hypothetical trades and trade rumors are garbage because we have this treasure trove. So keep your eye on OKC, man. It's going to be fun.
It will be fun. And I think that from a Kings perspective, you absolutely say no to Dort and 12 for 4, unless you just had some grand mastermind plan behind the scenes where it's going to be a Woj tweet every 5 seconds where, sure, we now have Dort and 12, but we just traded 12 for Jeremy Grant, and now we've gone all in on this 1 year to just break our playoff drought. Don't care about winning a title. We just want to break the playoff drought, and now we have a lineup of Fox, Dort, Mitchell, Grant, and then Rashawn Holmes is probably still hanging around, I think, right? And you're just going to move forward with that team.
Well, you probably are giving some Kings fans listening right now twitches because that's with Monty McNair not extending his contract yet, and with his fear of losing his job unless the Kings win. I'm not saying that's a probability, but there's maybe a 10% chance that fear creeps in. So I appreciate you, Rylan, now that you've broken both our hearts and our brains, and we'll do it again soon. Big thank you to Rylan for joining me here on Locked On Kings, even if he did shoot down my dream of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the Kings. I had a feeling that it probably wasn't going to be the case, but maybe there are other players on that Oklahoma City roster that the Kings could be interested in. Who knows? The idea of having OKC with 2 top 4 picks in this year's draft, I'm sure it's enticing a little bit to their fan base and maybe a little bit enticing to Presti and everybody over there, but not enticing enough, sounds like, to get rid of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Oh well. As expected. At least I tried. I can say that I tried here. We are going back to more amazing draft coverage here on Locked On Kings starting next week. Have, like I mentioned earlier, a Duke beat writer coming on. I have a couple, actually 3 national draft analysts coming on. One who should be very familiar to you, very well known here on the Locked On Podcast Network, Rafael Barlow. Can't wait to have him join me later on in the week. So the draft coverage keeps on keeping on. And if you liked those local perspective interviews with beat writers of the schools that some of these top prospects played for, like Keegan Murray and Jaden Ivey, you want me to do that, but for other prospects, let me know who, and I'd be happy to reach out and schedule those and get all that done for you as we head up to the draft, still, I think, around 30 days away or something like that. So we'll have to wait and see. We got a lot of time to kill, but a lot of time to do deep dives. Again, let me know who you are liking at that fourth spot if you're the Sacramento Kings to draft, who you trade the fourth overall pick for. And of course, if you could help us reach our goal of 350 reviews on the Locked On Kings podcast on Apple Podcasts. We're at like 316 right now. We get to 350 and I will buy a pair of Kings opening night, their home opener tickets, and I will be giving them away to a Locked On Kings listener. So if you could create an account, if you don't have one already, hit 5 stars, leave a little blurb about what you like about the podcast, why do you encourage other Kings fans or fans in general to listen to the pod. I really would appreciate that, and I look forward to being able to treat some of you to the Kings home opener. And this will not be the last ticket giveaway this season that I do. So appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me next week. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.